How's this? Can you hear me?
No.
Up. Can you hear me now? You might regret it. Okay, I'm trying to write a book. I've been trying to figure out a name just to call it as I write it, because you're supposed to have something in mind. And I've been recently calling it The Chronicles of a C+ student who says yes more than no. But it's each chapter, I've got 38 finished. Each one's a separate story. The first one, I'm going to read you two tonight. The name of it is Who the Hell Are You? The failure was becoming exhausting. For 2 straight weeks I had been at a gold mining camp in Sapon, Laos, trying to make our unexploded ordnance detection electronics function in one of the most mineralized places I'd ever seen. Everyday hovered in the mid-90s. It was monsoon season. The air felt wet enough to drink. Boots never really dried out. This was my 3rd trip to Laos, trying to solve a problem that seemed almost impossible. How do you detect metal bombs in soil so mineralized the ground itself behaves like a giant piece of rusty iron? At times your sensor could barely detect a metal bomb less than a foot away. Still, the unexploded ordnance field manager at the MMG Sapon mine believed in us. His company operated both pit and strip mines in a country littered with more than 80 million unexploded cluster bombs left over from war. He had watched our equipment outperform expensive European systems in actual field conditions, and he knew progress when he saw it, even if progress came 1 sweaty inch at a time. Late one afternoon, he tracked me down at camp. "If I covered the expenses," he asked, "would you be willing to go to Vientiane and help an archaeological conservator named Marion?" He indicated Marion had a postgrad in heritage site preservation and like me, is an Aussie transplant. I have worked with Marion on rescue archaeological projects at our mine. You'll like her. I told him sure. He explained that old Vientiane had once been a fortified walled city along the Mekong River. Somewhere beneath the modern landscape had been a gate reinforced with metal components. The river had shifted course countless times. The walls were long gone. Nothing visible remained. But Marion believed she knew where a part of the ancient entrance might be buried, and she needed metal detection equipment to find it. The next morning, I climbed aboard an aging Soviet-era helicopter that looked like it had survived 3 revolutions and at least 1 bad landing. It rattled out of the jungle and toward the capital. Hours later, I finally arrived in Mate Airport in Vientiane. I checked into the city and washed off 2 weeks of jungle grime as best I could and walked to the Lao National Museum. The museum itself was beautiful in a faded French colonial way, symmetrical, elegant, historic, the kind of building tourists photograph. Behind me sat reality. A long, narrow concrete block building stretched behind the museum grounds. No glamour, no polished displays, just archaeology in its raw form. The structure was divided into large, narrow rooms, each with a single window and a wooden door. Marion had emailed me hers would be open for sure. As I approached, only 1 window and 1 door along the entire building were open to the late afternoon heat. I headed toward them. At first, all I saw was a silhouette moving inside the dim room. Then I got closer and stopped. Inside sat a woman holding a human skull on one hand like a scene from Hamlet. York, I knew him well. Then she spoke to it. "Who the hell are you?" Not to me, to the skull. I remember standing there thinking, "Ken, somehow your life has become very strange." I leaned toward the open window and said, "Samedi, hello?" Without the slightest embarrassment, She looked up and answered, "Hello, you must be Ken." "I am. Come on in." I walked to my left and entered through the wooden door. The room felt like stepping into another century. It was dark and poorly lit, except for a hard tropical sunlight slicing through the open window and door. Long rows of long wooden tables filled the space from front to back. They were covered with pottery shards, fragments of carved stone, clay vessels, baskets of relics, and half-catalog artifacts, hundreds of them, maybe more, and lots of dust. The room smelled of old dust, damp, paper, cigarettes, and history. And there, sitting at a desk in the beam of sunlight, was Marion. But my eyes kept returning to the skull in her hand. Not a replica, not a classroom prop. An actual human skull, small, delicate, probably ancient. Marion took a drag from her cigarette, and in a rich Australian accent, she looked into the empty sockets and spoke gently. "Who the hell are you?" Then she politely exhaled smoke sideways toward the open window, like this was the most normal workday imaginable. I was mesmerized. Years earlier, I had worked around ancient ruins offshore of Alexandria, Egypt, helping support an archaeological mission studying submerged cities beneath the Mediterranean. But this was different. Egypt had been a grand and cinematic, sunken palaces, collapsed harbors, and lost cities. This was intimate. A human being was in the room with us, not alive, but somehow still present. Marion was dressed practically, field pants, work shirt, boots, and loosely wrapped scarf that I would later realize was part of her identity. No theatrical archaeological costume, no Indiana Jones nonsense. She looked exactly like what she was, a scientist who had spent years digging through the hard ground and brutal climates trying to reconstruct forgotten lives. She was a fully mature adult woman, Marion explained, found in the province, very upright in a somewhat stooping position. She studied the skull carefully. In Laos, people buried that way were often royalty or extremely important. That surprised me. The skull was small, not what I imagined when someone said royal. Marion pointed toward her teeth. "Look how worn they are. She likely chewed leather for years to soften it for royal garments. These aren't the teeth of someone born into privilege." Then Marion paused, at least not at first. The idea hit me immediately. This woman may have begun life as a laborer, someone literally softening leather with her teeth for the elite, and somehow ended up buried with royal honors. I asked Marion, "Was there any other evidence?" Marion nodded. A thin sheet of silver covered her forehead. That was a strong indicator of royalty. And suddenly the skull became something far bigger than bone. It became an individual. I sat staring at this woman who had died centuries earlier, trying to imagine the impossible leap her life must have taken. Maybe she had been beautiful, maybe brilliant, maybe funny. Maybe she simply met the right person at the right moment in history. Whatever happened, something transformed her from common labor into someone important enough to be buried like nobility. It felt like a Southeast Asian Cinderella story, written not in ink, but in teeth, silver, and bone. And I remember being deeply aware of how extraordinary the moment was. There was a bomb detection specialist from New Jersey sitting in a dim concrete room in Laos with an Australian archaeologist listening to her interrogate a centuries-old skull while cigarette smoke drifted through a shaft of sunlight. The world suddenly felt impossibly large and unbelievably small at the same time. My team ultimately helped Marion rescue archaeological art efforts. We had recovered centuries-old Buddhist amulets, bronze Buddha statues, and other priceless artifacts. As for the woman with the silver-covered forehead, I don't know whether Marion ever fully solved her mystery. But I do know she honored her with an endearing name, Mae Noi. In Lao, Mae is a respectful, honorific term for mother. And Noi means little. It's the equivalent of folks in the States calling a young woman little lady. But I still think about May Noi, the person in our chance meeting, and about Marion holding that skull in fading light, asking almost tenderly, "Who the hell are you?" Now, I have a very short chapter. It's not allegorical. There's no dead people in it that I know. And I'm going to read it to you. It's just one of my 38 that's finished. I think we're going to change the name of it from the Sweat Sisters, because my wife does not like that name, to Speed Dating on Wheels. Slight change. There is probably not a person on earth who hasn't tried to avoid the interest of someone they didn't want to be seen with. Sometimes it's instinctive, a gut feeling, no chemistry. Other times it's flat out aversion to a person. I was 20, and I was roller skating in America on Wheels with my wingman Bob. We both owned our own skates and skated a few times a month. It was a relatively low-risk social event with over 100 dating-age people circling the court. It felt like a slice of a Norman Rockwell painting. All skate was the default. Everyone skated on their own. When the rink's Oregon player announced couple skate, guys already knew which girl they wanted to choose to skate hand in hand for the length of the song. Sometimes it was girl's choice. It was a form of low-risk speed dating on wheels. 10 minutes into the evening, everybody knew who they liked to skate with and who they'd hide from. Once each evening, there would be a trio skate. Sometimes guys, and sometimes girls' choice. Trio skate had double the social drama. When I skate, I don't get sweaty. That night at the rink, there were two sisters who were both dripping sweat, talking nonstop to each other, and soap cleared through their clothes. Their eyeliner ran down their cheeks in black streams. Their tops clung to them in a damp bond. They had a reputation at the rink for grabbing unwilling partners. Skating rinks operate on a brutal social hierarchy. Who you skate with matters. Being seen hand in hand with someone considered undesirable could sink your rink standing for weeks. The two sisters had become notorious, and every guy in the building knew it. Every time the organ player announced couples, girls' choice, almost all the guys rolled straight into the men's room to hide from being nabbed by one of the Sweat Sisters. Just before closing time, I wasn't paying attention when the organ player announced trio skate, girls' choice. I was nowhere near the men's room door. I saw the sisters rolling in my direction. No place to hide. I got snagged. Now hand in sweaty hand, I was trapped. Me in the middle, a Sweat Sister on each side. The rink layout was simple, a large rectangle, two short walls and one long one. Along the other long side was a hip-high pipe railing separating the skaters from the concessions and the spectators who leaned there watching the action. I desperately wanted the sister skate to be over. Each time we circled the floor, the skater on the right could really feel the whip effect of three people skating abreast. As we came down the straightaway past the spectators, I felt every eye on us. The embarrassment alone made me want the song to end. I don't remember what song it was. It was way too long, so I began skating faster and faster, me in the middle, and his sister clamped onto each arm with wet, slippery hands. With every lap, the whip effect grew stronger. As we entered the corners, the centrifugal pull increased as the three of us leaned through the turn. By the time we entered the corner that led toward the long spectator rail, we were flying, holding on to each other for dear life. Then it happened. The sister on my right suddenly lost her grip. The whip launched her like a bottle rocket straight toward the railing. She hit it hard enough that from where I stood, looked like her head had come off. Something round flew through the spectators, bounced and rolled across the floor toward the concession stand. In that frozen instant, any reasonable person would have believed what I believed. I had just decapitated a girl. Her sister, still attached to my left hand, seemed to be in complete denial. She screamed, "Keep skating!" There was just the two of us now. I thought her behavior was insane. Her sister was surely dead, and she wanted to continue the song. As we completed the circuit, reality came into view. Standing by the rail was the not-so-headless sister, revealing 100 sweat-soaked pin curls plastered to her head. The rink manager was handing her the object that had rolled across the floor, her wig. The good news was I hadn't killed her. The bad news was that every person in the rink had seen me launch her wig into orbit. I stayed away from the rink for a month.